Hello, welcome to the Hope, Health, and Healing Podcast. I am Michelle Hannah Fields, and I am your host for episode 45, where we continue our discussion with Grace Jernigan Cadenhead. This is part 2 of a 3-part series, so if you missed part 1, go back to episode 44 and listen to Grace share the beginning of her faith journey. In this episode, Grace begins by talking about her underlying health issues and how important it was to stay safe during the pandemic. Her doctor had warned her that with her conditions, she needed to be very careful about where she went and who she was with. And even though she listened to her doctor's advice, Grace did contract COVID, and she did have to go to the hospital with double pneumonia. At that time, her husband Tony was sick as well, but he was at home. She shares how the day after she came home from the hospital on a walker and with oxygen, that Tony's situation had progressively gotten worse and he had to go to ICU. She wasn't able to visit with him at the hospital because she was still recovering herself, but she would send cassette tapes with her son for the nurses to play so that Tony could hear her voice. Tony, after about 3 weeks, then was also placed on a ventilator, and Tony didn't make it. Grace had to say goodbye to him, and then she began a journey of grief. She talks about in this episode what that journey looked like, the highs, the lows. And then she shares about a friend of hers who had just lost his wife and how he would send out daily Bible verses that were really such an encouragement to her. She also talks about how chapter 2 of your life can also be beautiful, even through immense pain and heartache of saying goodbye to your spouse. So sit back, relax with your favorite cup of coffee or beverage of your choice, and let Grace's continued story inspire and encourage you.
And my rheumatologist said, don't get COVID. I mean, they don't even know for sure how it was transmitted. And what really, I'll just say it angers me, is so many people felt like it was a hoax. There was nothing to it. They were over-exaggerating. They had no idea what to do exactly. And I know that because of being treated and because of watching what Tony went through being treated. So we made it all the way up until Christmas Day of 2020 and did not contract COVID, and the vaccine was right around the corner, and we thought, almost there. We've almost got it. So we didn't go to family gatherings, the whole bit, shopping online. And but now my son did come over. He came over for Christmas Day. And I had cooked, and it was the day after Christmas. We woke up that morning, we were, he actually took something back to Target and swapped it that morning. But by that evening, he and I we both had sniffles, we were losing our sense of taste, and we thought, okay, this must be COVID. We didn't feel that bad. Excuse me. And so, just to make a long story short, so that was the day after Christmas. By New Year's Eve, by then we knew, we'd had the fevers, the aches, and so we were, we called our doctors, but, we just thought, well, we'll tough it out. But New Year's Eve, I woke up and I just literally could not breathe, and I've never had pneumonia before, and so I didn't really know what to expect. He wasn't in that mode yet, but remember, I'm taking an immunosuppressant, and so my symptoms advanced more quickly. And so, to make a long story short, we both wound up with COVID, and I called my doctor, who said, go to the emergency room, do not drive yourself. Do not let your husband drive you. Call an ambulance because you need to be on oxygen right now. And she says I argued with her. I said, no, I didn't. And she said, oh, yes, you did. And and when I arrived, because he stayed home, of course, he said, we're admitting you. And I said, and I was on oxygen. I thought, oh man, this is all I needed. I just needed some oxygen. I really thought I just needed a breathing treatment. And he said, I said, you are? Why? He said, you have double COVID pneumonia. And he said, yes, and so I was in there 5 days, and Tony was still at home. And but I talked to him. My son called me, and he said, Mom, I just don't think he's doing well. He doesn't want to eat. Dad doesn't want to eat. He doesn't want to drink anything. And so I called him again, because we talked every day. And so I called my brother, who's a physical therapist, and said, I don't want to ask you to go in, but just go to the door and lay eyes on him. And so he said no. He said, my son brought him to the emergency room, which is where he probably should have been when I went. It hadn't hit him yet. But so we were in the hospital together for several days, and I was in there 11 days, but I finally made the turn. Yeah. And my hospitalist that was checking with me, and they told me, they said, we don't know really. We're going to give you the remdesivir, we're going to give you the monoclonal antibody, everything. He said, we're throwing everything but the kitchen sink at both of y'all. And they didn't know. And but they were hoping, and I kept saying, I think I'm better today. I could hardly talk or walk. And they said, you'll go home on a walker and you'll go home on oxygen. But I didn't. Wow. I got better.
That's awesome.
It is. I read some of the stuff that comes up on Facebook every now and then. I'm like, wow, I forget that, but I didn't. He said, all I know is that you've been telling me every day that I come in that you feel better today. He said, but I kept up in your oxygen. He said, but you know what? I do believe you are better today. Yeah. I turned your oxygen down, and I did get to go home without oxygen. But I'll never forget leaving the hospital because, you don't know. And so our last words were, don't you leave me. And his last words to me were, don't you leave me. Yeah. And they weren't the last words we spoke, but they were the last words we spoke in person. And so I went home, and ironically, that was the 11th, which was yesterday. So I went home on the 11th, 5 years ago. And today is the 12th. The next day, he crashed, and they put him in ICU. So that was today. That's so odd that we booked this interview today, and it's 5 years. It came up in my Facebook memories today. And I was like, wow, and they ventilated him, and so we never really spoke again. And thank goodness they had to keep him sedated and unconscious, but you never really know. And anyway, I won't go into all of that, but so for 26 more days, he survived. And I was able to FaceTime. You can't see him, no one on the COVID ward could have visitors, but my sister-in-law gave me the idea. She said that she had read that with children, they have a teddy bear that you can record a voice, and and I thought, well, I looked on Amazon, and I found a video recorder and cassettes, and so I taped messages. And you couldn't go up to the ward, but you could have it delivered to the ER because I was still under quarantine even when I got home. I still had pneumonia, but I was better. And so my son would take it up there for me. He would come and pick it up off the porch and take it to the ER. And I had a note, please play this multiple times a day for him. So that, because they always say, the hearing is the last thing to go. Even when you're ventilated and sedated and when in an induced coma, they don't know what you can hear.
Right.
And so I could call once a day, and they would FaceTime me once a day. And so I'd always tell them to play it, please play it. And they did. But he's with Jesus now. He's in his heavenly home now. I'm not going to talk a lot about what happened. He crashed, of course, and they did all they could, and even the doctor. He was wonderful, and I knew something was going on because there was a window of time in the morning that they always called me, and they would FaceTime. I could see him, but sometimes that was so hard because, it did not look like Tony, and there were unimaginable things happening to Tony. And that's what makes me so angry when I hear people say it was a hoax. They have no idea what this virus can do to people.
Right.
And it did unimaginable things. And so by the time I knew probably 2 weeks before that he was not going to make it. And you reach a point where you don't think you can ever let him go. But then you reach a point where you think, I don't know if I can bear him hanging on one more day.
Right.
You
don't want to see them suffer.
No, you don't. And of course, and I'd explain that. The doctors knew that I had to be prepared to do. And we went through this with his brother. His brother died of H1N1 flu. And he said, don't you ever let anything like that happen to me. And so I had a responsibility.
Right.
And so I told them, that they didn't know. There's really no protocol for what was happening with COVID. And but anyway, when they did call that morning of February 7th, that and he couldn't talk. The doctor he FaceTimed, but he wouldn't say anything. And I'd say, call him by his name. And I'm like, just tell me. I thought he maybe had already passed. I didn't know. And he said, it's time. He said, it's time. And I said, and then he told me what was happening. And he said, I'm not going to show you. They didn't show me a picture of him that day. And he said, I'm not going to show you, just if you can get your son and y'all come. And he said, and I said, how can I do that? How can I ever say it's enough or that it's time? And he said, when you get here, you'll be able to. And he was right. And it was my son that I was worried about.
Yeah.
But it was both of us. We were there. We, said our goodbyes. And I was ready probably 2 minutes after we arrived. But I wanted my son to have the time with him, but I just didn't know how much more I could endure. And but my son looked at me and he said, are you ready? And I said, oh yeah, we're ready. And that helped both of us because we felt like we set him free.
Yeah.
And we set him free. So you can love somebody enough to let them go.
Right. Yeah. It's hard, but
it is. It is hard.
It is
hard.
But God gives you that strength to make that decision and to realize, like, when he takes his last breath here, he's taking his first breath in heaven.
Yes.
And Paul, he says, we grieve, but we don't grieve as those who have no hope.
That's right. You're right.
And it gives us, it doesn't make it an easier journey to walk through, but it gives you strength to walk through it.
Well, you asked me earlier about, tell me about the times, spiritual times in your life when God, and that, again, got us through that and helped us through that. And I apologize. Isn't that funny? It's like
grief hits you
in waves.
It does.
It hit me in church yesterday. I didn't even realize. I didn't think about that. It's when you retire. They say you'll know what day of the week it is, but you won't know what day of the month.
Right,
and it's true.
Yeah,
because I didn't realize. I had not thought that. Oh, it's the 11th.
Yeah,
and it was the song that we sang in church. It's one that he built the sanctuary of the church, Somerville Baptist.
Okay.
And the song that we sang, I had gone there many years ago, when he built that church. And so when I walk in that sanctuary, I'm surrounded by him. His hands are all over that church, That was his project. He was the superintendent there. And anyway, it was a song from a musical that we sang during that time, and it's and it's beautiful, the majesty, the power and glory of His name. And anyway, so it evoked a reaction, and I didn't expect that, but it did. And but see, it's like your body. It's probably the weather, and it's like your body just senses that during this time of the year, those kind of things happened. So, but again, I said that because to understand grief, not that I don't really share this a lot publicly, but that just gives you a window into the type of grief that it was. I had been going through a type of grief with him since 2012 through COVID in 2020, and I'm just thankful that he had 8.5 years of being retired.
Right.
He could have never known what retirement was, and so he did live fully and happily. And he said that many times. He made sure that I knew, I'm happy, but he worried about me. He worried about me working, but I felt thankful to be able to work hard.
Right.
But he knows that I have issues too.
Yeah.
So that's just another time of, I can tell you, it's like the footprints prayer.
Yeah.
I look back and I don't know where the footprints are, because there's only one set. Mine aren't there. God carried me through that. And so that'll lead us to the next phase of this. I mentioned to you that Tim Cadenhead, who's now my current husband, came to the hospital door in 2012. I hadn't seen him in probably 2 decades, maybe longer.
Yeah.
Tony had. Good friends. And it was like medicine to his soul. I knew it would. I said, oh, it's somebody that you're going to want to see.
Yeah.
And he said, who is it? And, they visited, and it was so good for him. But Tim lived in Omaha, Georgia, has a cattle ranch, or had one. He was married to a girl that I also went to school with us. He was the pastor at Enterprise Baptist Church in Richland, Georgia, for 25 years. And he worked at a construction company that he helped start in Auburn, and had been there since 1979. So between Omaha, Richland, and Auburn, I'm like, when do you sleep? Truly, yeah. And so, and then too, you've got the cattle, you've got a farm is a lot of work. And so I'll never forget, because of COVID, right before that Christmas, we had been sent home to teach from home because of COVID. So this is another little window where God was preparing things. So you don't even know what's going on behind the scenes, but God knows.
That's right.
So I'm sitting there. My dining room was my classroom. So I told them when I went to Fort Benning, I don't want administration. I want to go back in the classroom. I want my summers off, because I wanted to be at home with Tony when he was home. So we had those 3 years of the summers off. I'd been 3 years alone in D.C. and Huntsville, and then the next 3 years I was at home with him during summers and spring break and that sort of thing. So that was a gift as well.
Right.
And I'll never forget, I was already about to go online in the classroom, and he would get up early, and he was standing in the kitchen, and he said, "Oh my goodness." And I said, "What's the matter?" And he was looking at his phone, and he said, "Tim's wife just passed away." And he's talking about Tim Cadenhead, and he looked. I'd never seen Tony cry. I'd never seen him cry, ever. I mean, he was strong. I'd seen him. He looked like he was, but I'd never seen him actually shed tears, and he didn't. But his eyes looked a little watery, and I just, because they'd been together. I was married 43 years. Tim was married to his wife 45 years. They married very young, and so we were worried about that. And he said, I was going online. I was at work, and he said, "I'm going to go and I'm going to take some food. I'm going to call him. I'm going to take some food on down there, and I'm going to go see him." Just he'd never been to his farm. He said, "But I don't care. I'm going to go." Well, then he came back and said, "Well, I called him," and he said, "Actually, I'm here in Phoenix City. I'm at a car center in Phoenix City because he had to have some work. I think something was a tire or whatever." And he said, but anyway, and so Tim has told me, this is his recollection of it. He said, "I'll never forget when we met." He said, "Just stay where you are. I'm coming to you." And he said when he came to where Tim was waiting for them to finish his car, he said big old tears were just running down Tony's face. And I was like, "You're kidding." I said, "Because I've never seen Tony cry. I've never seen him shed a tear." And they embraced, and of course we went to the funeral, went to the visitation and so forth. But so that was February 3rd of 2020. Like 2020, I think it was, And because it was February 7th of 2021 that Tony died. So his wife died February 3rd of 2020, and so Tony passed on February 7th, 2021, almost a year to the day.
Wow.
And so, but the thing is, it wasn't just Tony. And of course, she didn't die from COVID. She died of, really, it was like a stroke, an aneurysm. And she had been battling cancer, but that's not really what the cause was. She had had a type of melanoma, not skin, internal melanoma, but she'd had it for years since she was like 27. And they said, you'll live a long time with it, but it is. She did have to have treatment every now and then,
right?
And then I think she went through some remissions too. But it was actually a stroke that she died from, not COVID. And so whenever he passed away, of course, Tim was reaching out. He did reach out to me, and he reached out to several other people. A good friend of mine lost her husband to ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease. And then there were probably 5 or 6 of us who did lose spouses to COVID.
Wow.
And so he would do these prayer texts every morning. He would send out a prayer text to all of us. And so, anyway, so during that time, he would send them to me as well. And of course, I was Tony's wife. I mean, he knew me. We were friends, but I was Tony's widow. That's so hard for me to say, but I was his widow. And so that had a special place in a way, but it was also difficult, I think, for him too, because, I mean, and it's not like, don't get me wrong, this by no means, it's not like anything between us occurred right away. And actually, it probably was revealed to me before it was to him, before I think I knew first, really. And so, and of course, it was a long, it was a while later. So there can be a chapter 2 I'm kind of going ahead, and I've mentioned that Tim and I are married, but grief has its own, it's going to take its own time, and it's going to move in its own direction.
Right.
And I had always, his sister, Molly, good friend of mine, we'd see her through the years. I didn't see Tim, but we saw Molly all the time. She worked at the car place that we used a lot. For a while she worked there. She was the office manager. And so we'd always see her, and we'd always get an update. Well, how's Tim? And, how are things going? And how's your mom and dad? And so we kept up all through the years. Even, we knew they were out of town. He'd even lived in New Mexico and in Kansas for a while. He traveled some in the younger years. So anyway, but she did 30 Days of Thanksgiving. She wrote these podcast things on Facebook, and a friend of mine who lost her husband to Lou Gehrig's said, this years ago, she said, you need to get on Facebook. You'll reacquaint with people that you haven't talked to in years, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, when would I have time? I didn't have time. I was working so much. But I did. I finally did. And anyway, so I started writing the 30 Days of Thanksgiving, and it was so cathartic for me. I love to write. I've always, that's kind of like a secret dream of mine. I would love to be a writer. Or I used, I'd always said that. But, then I struggle with who would ever want to read anything that I wrote.
Right.
Who wants to read what I have to say? But then Tim would send me these daily posts, these daily prayer texts. And so it was on November 30th, the last day. And I said, I'll miss this, because without meaning to, I was able to look at part of what I'd been through with Tony's journey, with my journey, and grief, the journey of grief. And I was thankful for some of the things that had, come about, like just the ability to look at things and realize that, yes, there's heartache in it, but, through that heartache and through that grief, there comes strength. And sometimes it's like I'll go back and I'll read and I'll think, I did write that. I remember that now. But it's like you don't always remember it right away, because you didn't write it alone. The Holy Spirit directed you in some of that. And so he sent me a private message on Messenger and that night, and he said, I've been thinking a lot about it. And he said, I really think that you need to keep writing. I don't think you need to stop. He said, I've been reading them. I've seen that a lot of other people have been reading them. He said, I think you need to keep doing it. And he said, like on Facebook, like a blog. And he said, and if you'll permit me, I remember his word, he said, if you'll permit me, I even have a name for it. He said, you should call it Life Lessons According to Grace. And he said, and keep writing. And because I think you're helping people. And I thought about it, and I was reading. It was a lengthy text, but I thought, you know what? I wrote him back, and I said, thank you. I appreciate that, and I think I will, but only on one condition. That I call it Life Lessons According to Grace with a lowercase g, not a capital G. According to God's grace, not mine. Grace. And so that's how it was born. And I did every day. And it was amazing. And I joined a COVID grief group. Actually, I had joined it before he passed away. Just as I was, I don't know if you remember, they did the white flags up at the monument in D.C. We did that for him. And anyway, and so several things led me to this site. And so I did. I joined it, and I actually made friends with a lot of those people, and I think that my journey helped them, and some of their journeys helped me as well. And so that's what I did. And so I wrote that blog for about a year and a half. And during that time, Mr. Cadenhead and I had to go to Auburn one day for my rheumatology appointment, and it was my idea. We were speaking that morning. I always thank him for his prayer text, and this is like over a year later. And I said, "Hey, I'm coming up to Auburn today to see my Dr. Adams, my rheumatologist." And I said, Would you want to do what? Would you want to get together just as a friend? You know, that was truly my intent. And he said, sure. And we did that periodically for a little while, and it was just great, to see him. And then there were so many others in our classmates and others that he was talking to and ministering to, and then again the life lessons post were getting a lot of a lot of people like, you need to publish these, you need to, and I just I'm still back at that. I'd love to be a writer, but who in the world would want to? But that was a time that I truly can say I was not writing that stuff by myself. I was writing that with the Holy Spirit. Because, and it goes back, and he knows this, I prayed a prayer. Probably the second day after Tony's funeral, because once, everything transpired, you're going through the motions. I vaguely remember we didn't have much of a funeral or visitation, couldn't. And you just go through the motions, you do everything, but it was like after everything settled down, and it was like the second day after, everyone was gone. I literally remember being in my living room, in the floor, in a fetal position. And it finally kind of hit me, because I had turned my living room into a shrine of Tony's pictures all through the years, because after seeing what I saw every day with the FaceTimes, I wanted to remember him, who he was. And actually his doctor even said, can you show me a picture of who it is that I've been treating? I want to see him when he was healthy. And I appreciated that. And I said, I can show you dozens, But then I had all these pictures in my living room, and I just, Lord, I couldn't, even months after, I couldn't remove a piece of clothing, a shoe. I couldn't remove anything in his truck. His jacket was in the back seat, couldn't touch it. I wanted it to smell like him, just, all of that. And so I prayed, honestly. I said, Lord, you have to send me the Comforter, because I can't get through this without him. Send me the Holy Spirit. And I'm going to ask you to help me get through this grief. But I want you to do it in a way that it will help me, but it will also help me to help others. And I'm a collector of words, and that's one of the things that I wrote a post about with my life lessons. Collect words. And my very first two words that I ever collected were enough. That was the first one, enough. And the second word was next. And this is it. When you multiple meaning words, that's part of, I teach and I taught elementary school. And enough has two connotations. You can beg for or ask for enough. You want to have enough to get you through whatever you need. I've never asked to be rich. I've just always prayed, Lord, just give me enough, and maybe a little more if you have, if you see fit, but just give me enough. I've never wanted, I've never said, oh, make me rich, make me well, no. Yeah. Just give me enough of whatever we need. And, but then there's another way you can say enough. Like sometimes things can be so difficult that you just say, okay, enough. Right. I'm done. That's what I say. I'm done. Yeah. I've had enough. This is it. I'm enough. Mm-hmm. So enough was my first word. Mm-hmm. And my second word was next. Because when you use enough in that second connotation, okay, this is enough. Next. Don't look back. Don't dwell on it. Just move forward. Right. Move next. Mm-hmm. And that's what chapter 2 became for me. Mm-hmm. But I never realized that. But when Tim Cadenhead wrote me that prayer text or that messenger text, he wrote me the prayer text that morning, but that evening he sent me a private message and said, keep writing it, but I want you to, if you'll permit me, name it Life Lessons According to Grace. That was in direct answer to the prayer that I had prayed on my floor. Yeah. Help me find a way to get through this in a way that it will not only help me, but it will help others. And so remember I said writing is cathartic for me. And it is. It always has been. And I did. It helped people that were friends with me on Facebook, and I know it did the people in the COVID website. Some of them are my friends now. Mm-hmm. And but it showed me something about Tim. He's using Tim. Well, he's God's man, Yeah. But he put him in my life to help me in a way that he had no idea. I'm pointing to the microphone like he's in the microphone. That really, I'm telling you, I knew before he knew. I'm like, okay, there's a connection with him in some way. Our purpose is supposed to be aligned in some way, and that kept happening. And that, of course, that gets into another story. That's chapter 2, but it did. My friend and I went out west. It was a trip that Tony and I had planned for 2 years, and the first year it was canceled because COVID hit, and so we put it on hold. He always wanted to go to the ocean, and I was worried. I thought there's so many things that he needs to see that he may not live to see. And I wanted him to see out west because I was an Army brat. We lived in Colorado when I was in 2nd grade, and I sledded and ice skated, and I just wanted him to see all that there is to see out there, but we didn't get to go. So we were going to go the next year, 2021. But what happened. And so I told my friend, I called her after that day, after that prayer. I said, you know what? I'm going on that trip. And there's a Tim McGraw song called Everywhere. And he sings about an old girlfriend, but he's driving a truck and she wants to stay in her small town. But he said, you won't believe all the places you've been because I take a picture of you everywhere I go. And I looked over there at my montage, my shrine of photos, and I picked out my favorite photo of him, and I said, we're going everywhere. And so I call it the Everywhere Tour. It wound up being the Thelma and Louise Tour because we did go to the Grand Canyon, but it really was the Everywhere Tour. It was already planned, and I called my friend whose husband died of Lou Gehrig's, and I said, I'm going on this trip. I'm taking his picture with me, Tony's picture with me, and you're going too. And she just said, okay. She lives in North Carolina now. She said, okay. Yeah. And that's what we did. And before we went, because she also received a daily prayer text from Tim. And she said, Grace, do you know where Tim's church is? She thought it was in Phoenix City. And I said, no, I think it's in Omaha, Georgia. I don't know where that is, but I'm sure we could find it. She said, do you think we can go? She says, I'd just love to tell him thank you and support him. I said, I think it's a great idea. And I said, I'll text him and I'll find out where it's at. I'll text him back. And I felt comfortable with that because, I've known him. And so anyway, then I found out that, no, it's in Richland, Georgia. That's where and so I still didn't know where Omaha was. So that was like a year before he and I started actually having lunch together occasionally. My niece was also going to school at Auburn, and so she got a new puppy, a Labradoodle, and she was like, "Man, Grace, I want you to come see my puppy." And so anytime I would go to Auburn, we'd usually wind up, Tim and I would have lunch, and but anyway, that was for almost a year, off and on, and so that's how chapter 2 began. But if you don't mind, Michelle, I never wrote anything down. I had a routine of, in the morning, I'd get up early, I'd drink my coffee, I'd have my prayer time, I would read, I'd read devotionals or scripture, and I would let the Lord, I tried to let the Holy Spirit guide me. Yeah. But one of the life lessons that I wrote had to do with the time that I was living in Illinois with my aunts and my cousins, who were not thrilled to have my brother and I there to begin with.
I can imagine.
We had to share their room, their toys. Yeah, we had nothing with us. My dad just had to take us as we were, and he had no time to pack up, and there was no relatives there in Fort Benning, and but we became great friends, before it was over. But there's one called The Sprinkler, but it's about grief, and if you'll permit me, I would love to read that.
Yeah,
and
we'd love that.
Well, this one I have written down. I actually made a copy of it. Most of this stuff is on Facebook, and of course I wrote it cathartically, never intending to, and now I wish I'd made copies of all of that, but I have a few. But if you'll permit me, I'll read this. Okay. This is called Life Lessons According to Grace. The Sprinkler. After my mother's death in May of 1962, my brother John and me went to live with the families of my dad's sisters, Aunt Jenny and my Aunt Mackie, in Illinois. We alternated the time with them. I had just turned 4 in April, so I was still wet behind the ears. Now keep in mind, they were strangers to us, and Illinois seemed like some strange foreign land. We were used to the nomadic life as army brats and had spent most of our time in Europe at that point. My cousins were a little leery of us first. They were a little leery of us, too, at first. They had to share their rooms, their toys, their parents' attention with these two strangers that had taken up residence in their space. It was a little awkward at first. For me, though, it was majorly scary. I remember that feeling vividly of trying to sleep in someone else's bed, learning to eat someone else's cooking, watching what someone else chose for us to watch on TV, and worst of all, my dad can only visit us about every 2 to 3 weeks. He was still stationed in Georgia at Fort Benning. I loved when he visited, but literally went crazy when he had to leave. Then a miraculous thing happened. We started becoming friends with our cousins. We started enjoying the companionship, especially since summer had arrived and the hot weather provided us with new things to do, some of which John and me had never experienced. And then, one day, there it was. That thing in the yard that my uncle moved around a lot to water the grass. The sprinkler. It became known as the glorious sprinkler because on really hot days, or days that we were just bored out of our minds, it was the source of our rescue. It cured all of our problems. It helped us cool off, relax, have fun again, squeal, laugh, learn to take turns, and even compete. Who could run the fastest or jump the highest? We had to know. Then that made us compete even more. It also became an obstacle course and even a source of experimentation. Was there a way to go through it without getting wet? We found out no. If you ran through it really quickly, the fastest way you could, would that help you not get wet? We found out no. If you could jump really high over most of the sprays, would that keep you from getting wet? Again, we found out no. Sometimes we would just adjust it, and it rotated and changed directions. Now that involved timing. Could we outsmart it? Run away from it in the opposite direction from which it was spraying? No. We could not outrun it. We could not outmaneuver it. It always caught us. You guessed it. A sprinkler is a great metaphor for grief or problems and difficulties in life. There are all kinds of grief through death, divorce, loss of a relationship, loss of a loved one due to abandonment, even loss of vital material things. Grief and problems come in many degrees, many levels. You can't outrun grief or problems. You can't outmaneuver it. You can't jump over it. You can't go around grief. The path must be taken directly through it. You must get wet. Grief, problems, they wash over you. Like water, you are being cleansed by it. The sprinkler is the story. In this story is the source. In life, God is our true source of everything. Get wet. Let Him cleanse you, wash over you, pour His love all over you. And I hope you never look or think about a simple tool like a sprinkler the same way again.
That's awesome. I love that. And, I think as I've talked with people about grief and experienced my own grief, it does wash over you, and sometimes it comes like a wave that knocks you down. Sometimes it's just a little trickle. But I love that you said it washes over you and cleanses you.
It does.
And that's what God does. And He uses,
It takes time.
It takes time. And, some days it's gonna hit you like a wave crashing in the ocean. It's gonna knock you off your feet. It's gonna take your breath away. And sometimes it's gonna be really a refreshing time because it allows you to see how God has carried you. It allows you to see how God has moved in your life. And, it is that washing and that cleansing and that purification. And even though grief is hard and grief it's different for everybody, I think it's also a sweet time when you allow God to be near. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Hope, Health, and Healing. You are probably like me and shed some tears and maybe shared a smile from Grace's story. We can have joy and we can have sorrows, sometimes even in the same moments. Join us next time on Hope, Health, and Healing as Grace continues her story and shares how she has seen God moving in chapter 2 of her story. And if you have not followed our show, follow our show so that you're notified every time a new episode is launched. Be sure to like and comment and share this podcast with your friends and family. Thanks and have a great day. We'll see you next time on Hope, Health, and Healing.